Hello everyone, and welcome to the 8th plagiarized episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring Marcus Turner from Cosmonaut Variety Hour, a gaslighting nincompoop relying on dishonesty and strawman arguments to manipulate his audience into agreeing with them, and an absolutely punchable face, a user with stupidity towards his content. Today, we will be analyzing Marcus and rip his practices and channel apart. Now, to be frank with you, Cosmonaut Variety Hour is a huge inspiration for this channel, but not in a good way, and I'll discuss why during this analysis. Cosmonaut Variety Hour was a YouTube channel created on January 25th, 2013. Marcus since then has maintained a YouTube channel talking about all sorts of media, including Star Wars, Marvel, DC, among others. He is what I'd call a general entertainment review channel, and has no specific niche towards anything. Occasionally in his Star Wars videos, he referenced how he's a die-hard Star Wars nerd who's read the books and played the games. However, very rarely does he factor in the books when talking about Star Wars. The only example he cited a book in any of his videos as far as I've seen was citing the novel Tarkin by James Luceno to explain the whole hyperspace ramming plot hole from The Last Jedi. And there he committed the unforgivable sin of citing external material to cover the failings of a movie. He also showed a random passage from the book, without explaining the context or the passage itself. So whether Disney Star Wars canon did account for this before The Last Jedi was released is unclear and unlikely, given I don't see James Luceno as the type to fuck over the law like that. And as the story goes, he quit writing for Disney canon shortly after. It's very likely that Marcus either browsed Wikipedia or Reddit for the passage anyways, given this is the only time he took any of the books into account. I say this because he's actually a very surface level Star Wars fan, who knows very little about the lore, the themes, or the stories. As someone striving to become a Star Wars everyman, aside from his casual playthroughs of various Star Wars games, something that anyone can do, he doesn't care much about Star Wars beyond the basic content. You know what I'm talking about. The movies on the surface level, and then the Clone Wars, and whatever Disney shits out on Disney+. It's led to many doubting his claim that he's a die-hard book-reading Star Wars nerd, because he's fallen into the trap of every single super casual Star Wars fan in the book. He hates the prequels, directly citing Red Letter Media as the best review on the internet of the films, praises the Disney content, or at least most of it, and even with the games, has only played them on an extremely casual level. He's also been a shill for the Clone Wars, and despite claiming to be a hardcore book reader, doesn't even allude to the Clone Wars novels, or Star Wars Republic, or anything. Take it from someone who's tried to read external source material, like the comics and novels. Marcus Turner is a fake. As far as I've seen, he's only referenced the Clone Wars micro-series in passing. And that's when he was disingenuously criticizing Revenge of the Sith for getting straight to the action. When he criticized the last two movies for taking forever to get to the action. Practically confirming that even if the prequels met his standards, they'd still fail for some made-up bullshit reason. And this leads me into the next issue. The inconsistency. Marcus has commonly contradicted himself when it comes to his videos. An argument he used for one video will be disregarded in the next, and he doesn't take any time to explain why he changed his mind. An infamous example of this being when he criticized Sabine in Rebels for being a Mary Sue, but then made the opposite argument in his Force Awakens defense video. How everyone in Star Wars is a Mary Sue, where he missed the point and arcs of Anakin and Luke. I believe Marcus knows he's being disingenuous and lazy in his arguments, and that they all resort to false equivalences and strawmanning most if not all of the time, and that they resort to false equivalences and strawmanning most if not all of the time, but he doesn't care. He'll make his opinion of the video, then change it when he doesn't like the next thing for the opposite reason. I believe consistency is a big part of being a critic. If you don't like something for seemingly the same reason you like something else, you need to clarify that you either change your mind, or the story in question does something different that doesn't make it quite the same. Otherwise, you're going to have people point out how you contradicted yourself. Marcus has a lot of miscellaneous videos made critical about him, and it doesn't just apply to Star Wars. Whether it be his takes on Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, or his takes on The Last of Us Part 2, the latter of which having the nonsensical opinion that Joel Miller wasn't a beloved character because he wasn't a hero, which was pretty pathetic. Marcus is one of those content creators who thinks that anything goes when it comes to his statements on movies, shows, or games. And he can say whatever he wants, and that they'll automatically be liked, but unfortunately, persuasive reviews don't work like that. I somewhat believe that he relies on his poorly thought out, nonsensical takes to be talked about, because it gets him more attention at the end of the day. Not to mention his dedicated fanbase will spring to his defense, doing his job for him. And since I know the same will happen with this video, I will dispute one of the most common argument you Cosmonaut shills make right off the bat. And that's, it's his opinion, what's the big deal? The big deal is that his opinions are inconsistent. As I pointed out, he's prone to contradicting himself very often, and changing how he sees things on a whim. So while he consistently hates the prequel trilogy, he'll often use arguments that go against something he said in an earlier video. And he never clarifies that he changed his mind, or there's a nuance or additional context that makes it different. Liking something for the same reason you hate something else is inconsistent, and inconsistency lacks credibility. So if you make this argument, you have missed the point of why people don't like Marcus, and more importantly, his takes. They're very much bad faith arguments made on the spot, and you can tell how he hardly believes in any specific arguments he makes, because he'll randomly change his mind later. If the reason you like something is because you like it, that's not really a critical opinion at all. If you're going to review something, you need to go in depth, use examples, explain the whys and hows, etc. Marcus hardly does this. He doesn't seem to be passionate about really anything in general. He's not a hardcore Star Wars fan, or really a die-hard fan of anything else. And despite claiming to be a die-hard Star Wars nerd, he'd be laughed out of any Star Wars book club he'd try to join. Not that he'd join one anyways, because he hasn't read squat. If he was a reader, it's strange that he hardly takes the books into account in any of his arguments against the movies or shows. Aside from the one time he cited a random book, that being Tarkin. For someone who claims to be a die-hard Star Wars fan, the reality is that he's anything but. When he mentioned his prowess in external source material, it was merely a lie meant to convince the viewer that he knows his Star Wars, even though he commonly expresses ignorance on external mediums. Marcus, in reality, is a second-class filthy casual, meaning that he has limited experience outside the movies, but still not enough to make him a die-hard fan. He has played a few of the games and watched a bunch of the shows at the very least, but as he has demonstrated through the way he talks about Star Wars, he has definitely not read any novels or comics. He did not mention the Clone Wars micro-series until much later. And the idea that he's read the Republic comics, or the Shatterpoint novel, or anything, is out of the question. With that being said, Marcus also has a sense of entitlement in regards to how he sees Star Wars. Despite commonly insulting viewers in his videos if they don't agree with his arguments during said ramble, he is the definition of a stuck-up Star Wars fan. In his Force Awakens video, he dismissed Star Wars as a simple story about good versus evil and that being it, even though he acknowledged examples of Star Wars going beyond that. But he seems to believe that Star Wars should just be stupidly simplistic when it comes to the movies. Why only the external material like Knights of the Old Republic or the Clone Wars can do this, he doesn't explain. But he seems to have this make or break rule for the movies. If things get too complex for him to understand, he criticizes it because Star Wars is meant to be simple apparently. So never mind the spiritual story or the deeper message that's always existed in Star Wars. The stories to him have to be dumb and simplistic. A die-hard Star Wars fan would never say this. A true diehard fan would understand the complexity of the Force and deep expansive lore and themes that Marcus doesn't think exists. It's his main-sided reason for thinking the prequels are awful, not because of stale dialogue, or bad acting, or an overuse of CGI, or any other of those overused bad faith arguments. No, it's because the prequels told a complex story and he couldn't understand it. The prequels are not hard movies to understand. The first half of the saga, after all, is about the rise of the Empire and how it happened, and includes Palpatine's ascension and Anakin's transformation into Darth Vader. Now, I could rip on Marcus for shamelessly admitting he never understood the story of the Phantom Menace since he watched them 20 or so years ago, but a relevant question to ask is, why does Marcus think Star Wars should conform to this standard? Well, to give you the simple answer, he's lying. It's an easy criticism to make, and this is another one of those contradictions he makes, as he'll let Knights of the Old Republic and the Clone Wars off the hook for being bold, but he won't let the prequels, or any movie in the franchise that may be complicated or complex. He gives no reason why the movies can't do this as much as an RPG or television series. It also confirms that he hasn't read the books at all, because the books in particular, at least the old ones, has some very complex themes and ideas in them. And Marcus wouldn't be making this argument if he understood Star Wars on a basic level. But it's worth noting that few can be this stupid. Cosmonaut is very likely feigning his stupidity, and people who are illiterate agree with him. His channel is designed to appeal to the masses after all, instead of hardcore Star Wars fans. And Star Wars isn't the sole topic of his channel. And as the saying goes, if a man plays the fool, then it's only fools he'll persuade. With that being said, Marcus is appealing to the average viewer's ignorance to sell his videos. He treats his takes like majority opinion, especially when it comes to Star Wars, and he does a lot to manipulate his audience. It's why his defenders cling to his defense. It's safe to say that his reasons for hating the prequels are unfair, and he makes some of the worst arguments out of anyone, pretending it's his opinion when it's actually his dishonest bad faith statements because he can't come up with a compelling reason the prequels actually suck. Because the basic jinx of his distaste is the fact that he couldn't understand the story. Then he spins this as a basic rule of Star Wars, when it's not. And he even demonstrated it's not by citing KOTOR in the Clone Wars. He's a contradicting hypocrite, and he knows it. Despite being called out for this, he won't improve whatsoever. And I think it's important that everyone should always look for a way to improve, even if they're on top of the world. Otherwise, you'll easily make mistakes right afterwards, and you won't see it coming. His formula of being a moron works because he's speaking to casuals of any franchise. It's easy views, easy agreements, and easy clicks. And unfortunately, he's gathered a following large enough to cling to his defense whenever someone calls him out for his dishonest, poor-ass arguments, because relying on your fans to drown out the noise is far easier than defending your stance. So that's my assessment towards the psychology of this content creator. He's one of those YouTubers who chase what's popular and doesn't do any research, but it pays off in the end because he knows his audience will simply wash it out. While his video editing is nothing to sneeze at, the passion for any topic certainly isn't there. Marcus's strategy may be easy and sustainable, but there's no integrity. When it comes to anyone who tries to be a YouTuber, the content we make and the way we make it determine our style. And I think it's extremely important you think out what your channel's gonna be like before you make your first video. And unfortunately, Marcus Turner chose evil. Thank you for listening to this episode of Analyzing Evil. What do you think of Cosmotard? Leave your thoughts below. I'm JJ Plagiarisms, and until next time, what are stories but mystery boxes?
Under the mountain, a golden fountain. Were you praying that the law is strong?